In signing up for any kind of social activity, of which role playing games are one, you are signing up to be there, to be available, to come together with the group and play and have fun. In something unrelated to Dungeons and Dragons, like a hockey league, where you all split up into different teams and you come together and play the matches, then you are signing up to play those games. If you are the goalie and you cannot make it to a game one night, they may need to forfeit because there's may not be someone that is available to take your role. Too bad, so sad, everybody gets a loss. That stinks. You probably wanted to be there. There's some things that people will absolutely forgive you for, most people anyway. If you're sick, if the family's sick, if your boss asks you for a TPS report on Monday.
I'm also going to need you to go ahead and come in on Sunday, too.
Now you've got to spend the whole weekend figuring out what a TPS report is so that you can get it to them and you can keep your job. People understand those kind of unavoidable detainments. We're not in 100% control of our lives. Even though we meant for our weekends to be free, we cannot stop our boss from doing that, our family's getting sick, or us getting sick. We get it. It's cool. And it's also possible for us to start taking things for granted. Familiarity breeds contempt is a phrase meaning exactly that. The more something is available, the more familiar with it we are, even though we once thought of it as important, and it might still be, we start thinking of it as not important as human beings. It's just part of who we are. And for role-playing games, it can be very easy to take those things for granted because we play every week or every other week and we're on a schedule. It's always available to us. And this week, somebody's got tickets to see the Foo Fighters and they've asked me to go. And what does it matter if I miss a week? There's my music taste for you, by the way. Oh, okay. But what about next week when somebody else has their business trip that's unavoidable? And the week after that, somebody has an anniversary with their spouse. Or the week after that, somebody's kid has a concert that they've got to go to. All those things stack up and you haven't played Dungeons and Dragons for 2 months, 6 months. And then it gets into the dungeon master's head. We haven't played in 6 months. Why am I putting this effort? There's a lot of things that dungeon masters do behind the scenes, and a lot of it is fun for us. We can write our own adventures. That's why I like doing it for the channel. We can read them if we're buying pre-published, or you're downloading one of mine, or you are making your whole new custom world and thinking of how magic works, or you like to paint miniatures. Those are all things that we can do, but eventually, to get the payoff for that, we've got to sit down at a table, or maybe virtual, and play with other people. Otherwise, what was the point? Why did we do that? Why did we do all that work? And do they really appreciate it? Why do they keep taking me for granted as a dungeon master? And worse, it can start to feel like maybe I'm not very good. Maybe I'm bad at this. Maybe they don't like what I'm doing as a dungeon master. Why am I bother putting an effort in this? If nobody likes what I'm doing, we should just cancel this game. We should not play anymore and go do something else so that I, as a dungeon master, can go have free time to go do these other things that I enjoy, and then everybody loses out. That stinks. And it wasn't anything anybody really intended or thought was on the table when they had other things come up. And even if you explain to your players, this is all the effort that I put in, here's all it is, that doesn't really click for many people. There's a reason sympathy and empathy are two different words. People often assume that the teacher gets off at 3 p.m. when the students get off. They get off at the summer vacations when all the students get off. All those days that there's a holiday when the students get off, that's when the teachers get off as well. Then they get to go home. That is not true. They have professional development that they go to on those vacation days. When you have voting days in the United States and all those schools close down, the teachers go to conferences in other places. They do after-school activity, and that's how they make additional money in many districts so they can pay for their families. That's a thing they have to do. When school shuts down for the summer, they eventually get some of that time, but they're not paid for that time. They have to go find secondary jobs if they want to continue an income. It's hard to make somebody really feel that if they aren't legitimately in that job. You can sympathize, hard to empathize. Okay, it's not all doom and gloom, I promise. Don't click off yet. There are some ways to play that can make this easier and more flexible so that you don't have to have the same players in the room to continue to play Dungeons and Dragons, and what they're willing to accept is going to depend on the particular players that you're playing with. Start by making the adventures character agnostic. They don't really care, the adventures, what character shows up. That's how I learned to play in the 90s. We didn't have these gigantic books with an adventure in it that was supposed to span quite a few levels. We had something that was more like this. Pretty thin. And it has a bunch of maps in it and characters. And it didn't care who showed up. If my sister's druid Valori couldn't make the game, that's cool. I'll just play my dwarf cleric Barendorf instead, and they'll go along instead of my elven ranger Gallon that I was going to try to bring to the adventure. It's fine because the character didn't have any attachment to the world, but that's the downside. The characters don't have any attachment to the world, and the world doesn't care who they are. And that can be a lot of fun, this very dungeon crawly, but your players may not expect that. That's not normal these days when somebody sits down to play Dungeons & Dragons. They expect their character to matter to the world. And the world's going to understand them to be something that the world hinges around. More like one of those grand space operas like Deep Space Nine or like Battlestar Galactica, where they do form relationships between the characters and it matters what happens week to week. Okay, then you can do something where somebody else pilots the other character. You can't make it this week because you did get those tickets to the Foo Fighters concert and you want to be able to go do that. Okay, what if instead of me playing the character, my sister plays my character? Am I okay with that? Is she okay with that? She has to make some sort of decision about buying a magic item. That's not a big deal. Even if she has to make some sort of bargain with the orcs that they're going to go along and help protect the dwarves, that's quite a deal there, against the gnolls that are coming in out of the mountains. And we're going to forge this alliance between unlikely allies. Sure, go ahead. If that doesn't happen, we'll figure out something else. What if my character dies? Am I okay with her being on the hook for making a decision about my character being dead? What if they have to make a bargain with a god to come back and they fail the roll? What if I'm the one doing it and I rolled a 1 for my sister? I don't want to be on the hook for that, and I don't want her on the hook for that. So there's where do you draw the line? Maybe you say, look, it's fine all the way up until somebody has to make a campaign-defining decision or a character-defining decision. At that point, what do? Do you put a stopper in it and say, no, we're going to put that on the back burner, we're going to change the camera, we're going to go deal with this over here, or we go play a different game for a little while? Or do I call that person and say, look, this came up? Maybe that's something that the individual player defines. Says, look, I'm fine with it. No, Tim is fine with you doing whatever. If my character's life or their alliances, their story is on the line, and now it's not just a decision of combat, give me a call and I'll tell you what my character says. Even if I'm sick on the flu, I'll give you some conversation that says it's like this. Okay, cool. If you're all willing to do that. If you're not willing to do that, maybe you break it up into smaller adventures. You do put this on the back burner and go, we'll deal what happens to Barendorf later. He goes over there and we're all going to go over here and play the rest of the adventure. Yes, you cast the resurrection spell, but he's got something going on with his dwarven god in Klingeddon that he's got to go talk to him about. And we'll figure out what happens later. Okay, when do you do that? Maybe you do it on a non-normal D&D night and say, look, I'll get together with this other player, maybe 2 players, so that we can have some actual interaction between characters and different than what the player normally plays, so they can go along with Barendorf talking to Klingeddon about being resurrected and how that's going to happen. Some players have fear of missing out. That's a real thing, that they don't like the story happening when they're not there. So you're going to have to talk to the rest of the table and go, we can keep playing, but this is the price.
Did you pay the iron price for it or the gold?
If we get to keep playing, then you have to accept that James is going to play a solo adventure with Tim when you're not there. If you do that, I find, don't message the player that missed the game and say, hey, no, we've settled it. Barendorf is coming back from the dead. We had this really good time and played D&D without you. We don't say that last part. That's what it's going to feel like to them. Instead, when the recap happens, the last time our intrepid adventurers sacked the mansion of blah, 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 blah. Tell them there, because it tends to feel like more like the players being included in the explanation of what happened in the recap than being reported to that they missed it, because they're there at the table, they're re-included in the group. That feels a little better. Maybe you Skype the player in. Maybe they are at a conference, often Los Angeles or New York or whatever coast that's away from you, and you Skype them in. Does it stink to set up all that equipment? Yes, it does. Does everybody have it available? No, they do not. And I don't like doing it. It's one of the reasons that maybe I haven't played for a month, because some of my players have busy schedules and they go all over the place. They've got conferences they've got to go to. And if I was more relaxed about setting up all this equipment so that they could see the maps, fine. It's not a great experience, but it allows you to play. Maybe instead of doing that, you don't want to do that. You don't want to pull all this recording equipment down and go move it up to the dining room table so that they can see the map. Maybe you just go to Roll20 for a week. Is it the same experience? Again, no. There's no pizza, there's no adult beverages, there's no Oreos or whatever it is that you're eating at your game, but it's better than not playing, isn't it? What about a different night or a different day? We often schedule these things on a weekend. Many of my players said, hey, we're free Sunday to play Dungeons & Dragons, and they were free Sunday during the spring and summer. And then fall and winter came up and we found out why they were free to play on Sundays was because they keep Sundays free for Sunday night football. And all of a sudden Sundays are filled with something else that they'd rather be doing. Okay, I mean, I don't like football, but they do. We should have picked another night. And we can go to that another night and go, okay, fine. Can we play on Fridays? Can we play on Saturdays? Can we play in the mornings on the weekend? Maybe we all go out and have breakfast somewhere. And then we come back after having breakfast and omelets and talking about the last adventure, talking about what's going on in our lives. And now the game's set up and we go straight into playing Dungeons & Dragons, and you can get done by 1 or 2 p.m. and then go watch football. Maybe we play on a weeknight. Yeah, it's not great because we got to get up in the morning. Nobody likes that. But is it better to not get any games or get 2 hours of game time? If you can't get enough done in that time, maybe it's not worth it for you. But if your players show up ready to play and having already eaten, maybe 2 hours is all that's really needed to close something up. Or maybe that 2 hours is all you really need for that side adventure to button up what happened to Barendorf, who's talking to Klingetten. Players, be flexible with your dungeon master and be willing to accept that you may not always get what you want, but you might find that you get what you need. Yeah, Rolling Stones. Just talking to the dungeon masters, all the players, I can't stop you listening. Try not to hold the players responsible for other players' action. Give them the benefit of the doubt. If player A, let's call her Jennifer, calls out, then Nick calls out, and then Tim calls out, it's very easy to burden Tim with all the previous absences, to see them as the players calling out instead of a player calling out. Now Tim is getting yelled at for everybody else that has called out, and that's not really fair to that one person. We don't know everything that's going on in their life, and Tim could have been there for every game for the last 6 months, and this is the one time he's calling out, and now he's getting barked at for something that's perfectly reasonable. Until there's a pattern, assume that they don't mean to insult us. It's easy to see them as not appreciating the work that goes into it, all the effort that you put in to make sure that they have a good, engaging, fun time at the gaming table. They got other things going in their lives. But if they do start having a pattern, you're going to have to do that classic thing of talking to your players. And then that's good advice. What do you actually say to them? Let's pick a name from my group that I've never played with. Never played with a Frank. So Frank is my example player. Frank, you've been calling out 3 and now 4 weeks, and it's becoming a pattern. And I just want to check in and see if are you really wanting to play D&D, or is this something that you're just kind of going to be included in the group with? And if that's the case, with the callouts, I'm worried that the players are going to start to begrudge you doing that. And I'd rather we move D&D to another night and play with the people that are involved and not make you feel like you have to do it just because the rest of us are your friends. Let's do something on the nights where you are available. Go see movies, go to concerts, go have, dinner somewhere, whatever it is that we need to do, and hang out together so that you feel like you're part of the group and we don't start to hold you responsible, begrudge you, not really enjoying the same activities that some of us do. That's fine. And if you are really into this, I want to see if we can move it to a night where you are available. Or maybe we have to go to virtual so that you can play with us set up cameras or that kind of stuff, I'm willing to work with what we can do. It is more work on the Dungeon Master to set these things up. It stinks that it always falls on the Dungeon Master to kind of do those kind of things. But at least for me, the reward is worth it. It's different for everybody. So until next time, Dungeon Masters, remember, you're a player too. Try to have some fun.